Hello everyone, welcome to the Psychologist NGTV with me, Dr. Blessing and Tamu. How are you? I hope you're calm and happy. Let's look at a simple scenario. Supposing you were taking a walk in the forest, then you hear a characteristic hissing sound, the sound of a snake. Or let's say that you were taking a walk in the forest and you heard the roaring of a lion. What happens? Immediately that sound, you hear that sound, the amygdala, a part of your brain, senses a threat and it begins a process in your body. And that process is meant to prepare you to fight back or to flight or to take flight. That's to run away. We're talking about the neurophysiology of stress, the neurophysiology of stress, the fight or flight reaction. Now, in the course of this discussion, I'm going to be talking about certain organs in the brain. Remember, when we talk about neuro, we're talking about the nervous system, of which the brain is the chief part of the nervous system. So I'm going to be mentioning some organs like the amygdala, like the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the adrenal gland, and a few other organs. But it's not in complex. I want you to pay attention to what happens in your body when the stress response is activated appropriately or inappropriately, and what are the consequences to your health. That's the main core of what I'm going to talk about. So don't let the mention of these organs discourage you from getting the information. Like I said before, it is as simple as ever. Just pay attention. So let's go back to our hypothetical situation. You hear the hissing of a snake or you hear the roaring of a lion, and the amygdala senses a threat. The function of the amygdala is to preserve our lives, to preserve our existence. And so it does everything to keep us alive. So once it senses a threat, the hypothalamus, which is a tiny organ in the brain, quickly sends signals to the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland will now release epinephrine or adrenaline. I'm sure we're familiar with that hormone. And that's the hormone that kickstarts the stress response or the fight or flight reaction. Now, the moment adrenaline is released in your system, a number of things happen within your physiology to prepare you either to fight back the threat or to take flight. And now, because you really have to stay safe, all the things that happen in your system, gives you an extra burst of energy. So in the face of this threat, your reaction will be more than you will react if there was no threat. One of the things that will happen is that your pupil will dilate to increase your vision. So you're seeing more clearly, simply put. And also your attention centers in the brain will be activated. So you're more alert. Okay. Now also your heart rate increases. So more blood is pumped through your system. Your heart rate increases. Your heart begins to beat faster. Now also there's diversion of blood from the skin and from the guts to the muscles. There's diversion of blood. As a matter of fact, digestion will stop to conserve energy. Now your metabolism increases. So more energy is made available for you to take flight or to fight back the threat. Okay. Now also there's mobilization of your immune cells. So your immune cells are mobilized. Your inflammatory cells are also mobilized. There's also, your inflammatory hormone is released. Okay. So all this prepares you just in case you sustain an injury during fight or flight so that your body can fight back. Another interesting thing takes place. Now your blood platelets thicken. Now why does this happen? Your blood platelets will thicken so that just in case you sustain an injury, the rate of bleeding will be slowed down. Okay, so that probably before you get help, you will still be alive. You will not lose too much blood before you get help. So all this happens in your body just to make sure that you're safe. Respiration will increase. You're taking in more oxygen. Okay, you begin to perspire so that your body temperature can be maintained. Because our body is meant to exist in a state of homeostasis. Now, when we are in this state of a stress response or the fight or flight reaction, we say that we are in a state of arousal. So this is not a state of homeostasis. And so your body is gathering up and using up a lot of its resources, more resources than it will usually use up. But it is okay if there's a physical threat and you respond to the threat. And the moment this threat passes away, the parasympathetic nervous system will now return your body back to a state of homeostasis. Anything that disrupts this balance is not really good for us, especially when the disruption is sustained for a long period of time. Now, let's just take another scenario. Now, the adrenaline is released in your system, and this threat is sustained for a while. So, you keep running, the lion is chasing. So this happens, it's sustained for a while. So when the adrenaline begins to wane away, it reduces in your system, the hypothalamus again activates the release of a second hormone to sustain the stress response. So the hypothalamus releases a corticotropic releasing hormone, and this hormone is released by the hypothalamus. It goes all the way to the pituitary gland and stimulates the pituitary gland to release a hormone, adrenocorticotropic releasing hormone, and this hormone goes to the adrenal gland and causes the release of cortisol. So cortisol is the second stress hormone, and cortisol now sustains the fight or flight reaction. So like I said, if the fight or flight reaction is activated appropriately, good for you. But when it's inappropriately activated, and then it's activated too often and is sustained for too long, your body becomes stressed. Your body exhausts its resources. It exhausts its resources. So it reaches a state of exhaustion or burnout. And that is not good for you. Okay, now what activates the stress response inappropriately? When there's no physical activation, when you undergo anxiety or worry or rumination, you're activating the stress response. When you're multitasking, you're activating the stress response. Okay? When we have also experienced emotions like anger too, we're activating the stress response, and when there's a physiological activation, sometimes just mere competition in the office, you perceive an individual as a threat to your success or your growth in the office, it activates the stress response. And when there's this psychological activation, when there's no real physical threat, you activate all this energy, all this burst of energy is released in your system with nowhere to go. So you begin to feel dizzy. That's when it's inappropriately, activated. And then this can cause harm over time. So remember that each time your stress response is activated for too long, it's sustained for too long, or activated too often, it means you have what we call an increased allostatic load. And what's the implication of having a high allostatic load? This is what is likely to happen in your system. Okay, you're going to have atherosclerosis. Okay, that's the hardening of the arteries, and this will lead to a host of cardiovascular diseases, high blood pressure, and all of the cardiovascular diseases. Also, you're going to have a problem with your immunity, reduced immunity. Okay, you're at the risk of suffering from inflammatory diseases. You're at the risk of having thinning of your bone, at the risk of suffering from osteoporosis. You're also at a risk of suffering from asthma. You're at a risk of suffering from stomach ulcers, amongst other diseases because of stress. And these diseases are referred to as psychosomatic diseases. So for you to prevent suffering from all of these diseases, also you have a risk for depression and anxiety disorders and other mental health disorders. So to prevent yourself from suffering from all of these diseases, you have to ensure that the stress response is not activated inappropriately. Or you have to ensure that you're not always under stress. You're able to cope with stress or manage stress or prevent the stress response being activated inappropriately. This leads us to our next video. This is going to be a series. So in the next video, we're going to talk about preventing the amygdala hijack or calming the amygdala. You don't want to miss that one. If you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, this is the time. Click the subscribe button, get subscribed, and follow us to our next video in this series. Thank you for listening. I hope you had a good time listening and you learned something new. Let me know what you learned in the comment section, and I wish you an amazing day free of stress.